Someone can remind us how we define body tissues.
Body tissue, this is a group of cells which are formed together to perform a specific task.
Okay, as simple as that. A group of cells that are specialized to performing a particular function within the body. So these tissues within your body, they are only four. We have the epithelial. These are tissues made up of epithelial cells, as you can see here. Then nervous tissues, they are made up of nerve cells. Muscle tissues are made up of muscle cells, or what we call muscle fibers. Then connective tissues are made up of connective tissue cells, as you can see here. So there are broadly four categories of tissues, and each tissue has got its unique function within the body. So right now we are going to look at epithelial tissues, and if time allows, we are going to introduce connective tissues. And then we shall be only remaining with just one session to look at connective tissues broadly. Remember, I tasked you to read about nervous and muscle tissues. I'll send clear objectives that you'll be following to read about those tissues in the reference textbook. But today we are just looking at epithelial tissues and an introduction to the connective tissues. Then in our next session next week, we shall be winding up with this chapter or course unit of cells and tissues. As I told you, it's just a basic course unit that we can't cover for in many lectures. Okay, so we are going to look at epithelial tissues, and these tissues, basically, you can also call them lining tissues. They are going to line different surfaces, cavities, and different structures throughout the body. And they have very many functions based on where they are found, as we are going to see. So they are found almost throughout the different parts of the body. They form the linings of the airway, the lining of the lung, the lining of the intestines, the kidneys, pancreas, the urinary bladder, the lining of the skin. That's why we are calling them lining tissues. They are made up of cells that form linings of the internal and the external body surfaces. As simple as that. These tissues have unique features. One, they are entirely made up of cells, nothing in between. Okay, almost nothing in between, as you can see. Here we are seeing an epithelial cells forming the epithelial tissue, the epithelium, and these cells are connected to each other via these junctions, these cell junctions that you see. So they are firmly connected to each other via the cell junctions. And that makes these tissues to be held in position firmly, okay? Because they are going to make up linings of the body, linings that are going to somewhere protect, secrete, or allow absorption, depending on where the tissue is. So they have to be firmly anchored by these cell junctions and to make them stable, basically. So that's one feature, cellularity. They are only made up of cells that are bound together in cell junction. Then two, avascularity. They don't have blood vessels. For example, this is the epithelium here. Below it, we have the connective tissue. Within the epithelium or the epithelial tissue, there are no blood vessels. There are no blood vessels. That's what it means. But of course, we know that cells have to thrive through the nutrients from the blood capillaries. So basically, these cells will thrive through nutrients that will come from the capillaries within the connective tissues. These nutrients will diffuse through the connective tissues, go through the basement membrane, and reach these individual cells to nourish them, allowing them to continuously perform their roles. So all epithelial tissues that you know, all of them, they don't have any blood vessels within them. And that can be good because imagine we lose epithelial cells in different situations. Just by taking, let's say, hot drink, some lining of your mouth can peel off. But you may not believe, you may not bleed simply because that lining doesn't have blood vessels. So it might be okay because just bleeding, just from taking something hot, it can be quite uh, unfortunate. We continuously lose skin cells from the skin, but we don't bleed. Okay, we continuously taking raw food particles in our alimentary canal, and the cells lining the canal always are continuously they continuously wear off and rebuild, but there is no bleeding in the due process because these tissues don't have blood vessels. So them lacking blood vessels can be of an advantage in that way. Okay, as I have explained. So that's second feature. Then the other, it can obviously be seen here. These cells are going to be anchored on what we call the basement membrane. The basement membrane is a layer that will firmly anchor the cells, supporting the tissues in position, but also it's a layer that will allow the diffusion of nutrients from the underlying connective tissues to the overlying connective tissue cells. Okay, um, that's that's a third property. Then regeneration. These epithelial cells can undergo regeneration. If some part of your skin is injured, within a few weeks or months, those cells are going to be replaced because the remaining epithelial cells have the capability to undergo cell division. All epithelial tissues have stem cells that are programmed to continuously divide to replace any injured or epithelial cells that may be worn off, okay, from its site. So that's a good feature, okay. But also, this continuous regeneration can be disadvantageous because these tissues, as we said last time, they can be prone to cancer since the cells are always going through the division process due to allow regeneration. These cells can be prone to becoming cancerous. So that's a disadvantage of this. Okay. So that's another feature. There are many features of epithelial tissues. I just summarized a few, and they can be seen here in this image. These tissues are only made up of cells. The cells are tightly bound to each other through cell junctions. The cells are anchored on the basement membrane. The tissues lack blood vessels, but they obtain nutrients from the underlying connective tissues through the basement membrane. And these tissues also are going to be well supplied with nerves. We know that nerves are going to be basically structures that will pick signals from particular parts of the body. So all epithelial tissues, all doesn't matter whether the tissues. Irene, can you kindly mute yourself, please? Unmute yourself. Okay. So I was saying these tissues are well innervated. That means they're well supplied by nerves. And these nerves are intended to pick signals, okay, from these epithelial tissues. all epithelial tissues, they are well innervated by nerves. For example, your skin, it's well innervated. If there is, let's say, any kind of injury, you will feel that the pain from the injury. If something hot is put on your skin, you will feel that because your skin has different nerve fibers that will be able to detect different changes or stimuli. Same goes to any part of the body. Within your stomach, if you overeat, of course, there's nerve fibers in this epithelium that can, of course, detect that stretch, and of course, you feel some bit of pain or discomfort, let me say, when you overeat. Then it could be any other part of the body. Let's say the urinary bladder. Let's say you've been there, like, let's say for the full day without urinating. The too much urine in the urinary bladder will stretch the walls, inducing the nerve endings in the wall to send signals, and you will feel some bit of discomfort because of the too much urine that is within the urinary bladder. Because the inner lining of the urinary bladder is made up of epithelial tissue, and that tissue is well innervated. So that's another feature that basically is very important. Okay, it has protective purposes. It being innervated by nerve fibers, it can easily help us sense changes, and that can be really helpful. Okay, so those are the features of epithelial tissues. Uh, Number one, I said they are only made up of cells. The cells are anchored on the basement membrane. They are well innervated. They are avascular. They don't have blood vessels. Then also another one. These cells, the epithelial cells, can undergo modification. This modification specifically happens on the top surfaces of the cells. The top surfaces of the cells are called apical surfaces of the cells. These apical surfaces can undergo modification to either form cilia, to form microvilli, to form sterocilia, or any other kind of modification. So depending on what the particular epithelial tissue does, that tissue can easily undergo surface modifications on the apical surface to suit the function of that particular type of epithelial tissue, as we are going to see. Okay, so those are just unique features of these tissues. Here we are seeing, of course, a slide showing us the epithelium of the small intestines. We can really see the features that we've been mentioning. Uh, this epithelial tissue is only made up of cells, just cells, nothing in between. Okay, that's the feature that we call cellularity. And then we can see the cells are tightly bound together through cell junctions, though you can't see them here. But these cells are going to be firmly held together. They don't separate, they are firmly held together. Then the cells are anchored on a platform that we call the basement membrane for firm anchorage and support. Then these tissues have blood vessels. The blood vessels are in the underlying connective tissues. And these cells receive nourishments from these underlying connective tissues through diffusion of nutrients through the basement membrane. Then you can also see that the top surfaces of the epithelial cells can undergo modification based on the particular role of that specific type of epithelial tissue. So all those are features of epithelial tissues. Can ask the question, Simon Patrick?
Yes, good morning, sir. Sorry, my question was about one of the features of the epithelial tissue, where you say they are vascular. So I was going to ask you that how did they receive their nourishment? But along the way, you already explained that their nourishment or how they
Okay.
get their nutrients is by diffusion. So that's you already answered my question. Thank you.
All right, all right. Okay, so these tissues can be categorized. How do they categorize? Well, how are they categorized? We categorize them based on two criteria. Number one, the shape of the cells. Number two, the arrangement of the cell layers. Based on the shape of the cells, we have three categories of epithelial tissues. Number one, we have tissues that we call squamous epithelial tissues. These ones are tissues that have cells that are thin and flat. Then two, we have cuboidal epithelial tissues. These are epithelial tissues that have cells that are round or cube-shaped. Then columnar epithelial tissues, they are tissues that have cells that are column-like, and as you can see here, those are columnar epithelial tissues. So it's a bit direct, and here it's based on just the shape of the cells that form a particular epithelial tissue. Then we can categorize epithelial tissues based on the arrangement of layers, or you can say based on the number of cell layers. If the layer is 1, that tissue is called simple epithelial tissue. If the layer basically if you have categorize these tissues based on the arrangement of the layers, based on the number of cell layers. And based on that, we can categorize these tissues into two. Number one, the simple, which do have just one layer of cells. If we have more than one layer of cells, we call that stratified or compound epithelial tissues. So using these two criteria, we can end up with particular or specific examples of epithelial tissues. For example, we have what we call simple squamous. This is a tissue with only one layer of cells, cells that are thin and flattened. Simple columnar, single layer of cube-shaped cells. Simple cuboidal, single layer of cube-shaped cells. Simple columnar, single layer of column-like cells. Stratified squamous, multiple layers of thin and flat cells. Stratified cuboidal, there are many layers and these layers are cube-shaped. Here the layers are, the cells are column-like. All these are categories or examples, specific examples of epithelial tissues. We come up with them using these two criteria, the cell shape and the number of cell layers. So now the next objective is to look at where every example of epithelial tissue is found in the body and its specific function in that part of the body. That's all. Okay. So starting with the simple squamous, as we have described it, of course it's going to be found in particular parts of the body carrying out specific functions. As we can see, number one, we are going to find this lining around the air sacs. These air sacs are made up of those thin cells, thin and flattened. Those cells that are thin and flattened, they are called simple squamous epithelial cells. These cells are thin enough to allow easy diffusion of these gases. When you take in the oxygen, it goes into your respiratory tract down towards the air sacs, and it's going to move from the air sacs smoothly into the blood vessels by diffusion without any difficulty. Then the carbon dioxide from the blood capillaries around the air sacs, it will be transported by diffusion easily through that layer. It will enter the air sacs so that you can easily expel that carbon dioxide. So this layer is going to be found along the air sacs, and the function there is to allow easy gaseous exchange. Okay. Then two, this layer can be found lining the Bowman's capsule. The Bowman's capsule, it is this cup-shaped structure that you see here, a structure that helps in filtration of blood. We all know that filtration of blood occurs in units, specifically in the kidney nephrons. These nephrons have a cup-shaped part that you can call the Bowman's capsule. This Bowman's capsule will be the one to participate in the filtration process. For filtration to occur, this layer of the Bowman's capsule has to be thin and made up of flattened cells that can allow easy diffusion of the different blood components. You all know that there are components in blood that have to be pushed down into the nephron to be part of the filtrate, which will later contribute to the urine. So that filtration occurs smoothly because of the presence of the simple squamous epithelial tissue lining the Bowman's capsule. So that's another location and the function. Then we can find this simple squamous epithelium lining blood vessels. We have three categories of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. This layer in these blood vessels, it's going to be called the endothelium. The simple squamous epithelial cells, they will form a layer that we call the endothelium. You can see it here. You can see it here in the vein and in the capillary. So this is a layer of simple squamous epithelial cells. You can see the cells, they are thin and flat. So this layer in the capillaries, it's going to be very important to allow easy exchange of blood components with the tissue cells. As you all know, in every part of the body, we have capillaries. These capillaries, they can allow easy movement of the nutrients from the blood or the oxygen from the blood into the tissue cells, and also the wastes from the tissue cells into the blood. That is made easy because of this thin layer that we call the endothelium. Then we have this endothelium also lining these large vessels, arteries and veins. Arteries and veins, they are lined by this inner layer. And who can tell us the function of this endothelium in the arteries and veins? How do you think it will be relevant in the arteries and veins? Anyone to tell us? Anyone to raise their hand and speak? What do you think would be the function of the arteries, of the endothelium in the arteries and inner layer of the veins?
I think those cells are smooth for easy flow of blood.
Okay, so this layer is going to be smooth enough to allow easy flow of blood within these blood vessels. Blood has to flow smoothly through the blood vessels. And to flow smoothly, we need a smooth interface. This smooth interface is created by the endothelium. Normally, whenever blood meets a rough surface, it will clot. When you pour a drop of blood on any surface, within a few minutes or seconds, it will start clumping together, clotting. So if the inner lining of the blood vessels was rough, it would easily increase chances of the blood to easily clot. It would easily increase chances of the blood to clot. Okay, clots are only supposed to form when there is a vessel injury. Without vessel injury, these clots, once they form, they can be deadly because they can move to different parts of the body. Let's say to the small vessels of the lungs. These clots can block those small vessels of the lungs, resulting into difficulties in breathing and also death over time if those clots are not medically managed. Okay, so that's the importance of this layer in your blood vessels. Then in the veins, this endothelium is modified to form flaps that form valves that will be positioned in the wall of veins. We all know veins carry blood upwards towards the heart, and these veins are going to be carrying blood against gravity, so there's need for the valves to prevent the likelihood or the tendency of blood from flowing backwards to where it's coming from. Blood has to flow in one direction, upwards towards the heart. Okay, so that is the relevance of the simple squamous epithelium in the blood vessels. This epithelium also will form what we call serous membranes. Serous membranes, these are membranes that have the capability of forming fluid. Serous means fluid, okay? So we are going to have these membranes lining vital organs of the body. We have the serous membrane around the heart, we have the serous membrane around the lungs, we have the serous membranes around the intestines, okay? These serous membranes are going to act as double-layered sacs that will be made up of two layers. For example, if I'm to show you here, for example, we have that layer there, that is layer A, then that one there is layer B. Layer A is known as a visceral layer. Layer B is known as a parietal layer. Around the heart also you can see is that inner layer, that is layer A, that outer one is layer B. Again, A is known as visceral layer, then B is known as the parietal layer. Visceral means that this layer is around the viscera or the organ, tightly around the organ. Then parietal means this layer is close to the wall, the body wall. So this one around the heart, specifically you can call it the visceral pericardium, because peri means around, cardium means heart. So it's a visceral layer around the heart. B is the parietal pericardium. Okay. Then around the lungs, A will be your visceral pleura. Pleura is the thin layer. It's a term used to mean the layers around the lungs. So A is the visceral pleura. It's called visceral because it is close to the lung. Then parietal is parietal pleura. It's called parietal because it is going to be close to the chest wall. And you can see that in both cases, we shall have a space between the layers. That space is going to be called the serous cavity. Around the heart, that cavity will be called the pericardial cavity. Around the lungs, that cavity will be called the pleural cavity. Now, within this cavity, there's going to be some amount of fluid, a thin layer of fluid that will be very important to lubricate these layers, so that whenever the lungs move, whenever the heart move, whenever the intestines move, these layers don't come together to cause friction. But also this thin layer can also contribute to shock absorption. Let's say when there is trauma to the chest or to the abdomen, somehow this thin layer can contribute to shock absorption so that your organs are not severely injured when there's trauma. Okay, so in the abdomen, we have the organs there. Okay, so there's that thin layer around the organs. That thin layer that you see, that is called the visceral layer. Here we are going to call it the visceral peritoneum. Okay, and this visceral peritoneum, just like it was in this case, it's going to reflect to be attached on the body wall, and that layer that will be attached on the body wall, it's going to be called the parietal peritoneum. Okay, and between the two layers, we shall have just a space containing fluid that we are going to here call the peritoneal fluid. So this epithelium is contributing to the formation of serous membranes. Serous membranes are double-layered sacs, as you can see, double-layered sacs that are going to form cavities. Cavities that are going to be around the organs. Organs are not found in cavities. The heart is not found in the pericardial cavity. The lungs are not found in the pleural cavity. The intestines are not found in the peritoneal cavity. The cavity only contains fluid, but that cavity is found around the organ because the cavity is containing fluid and we need this fluid to cushion the organ from external injuries. Just like as you see the balloon, when you inflate the balloon and you try to push your fist into it, that fist is not going to be within the balloon, but it's going to be enclosed by the balloon. So that thin layer of the balloon close to your fist is the visceral layer. Then the layer that is not close to your fist is the parietal layer or the outer layer. And the space between the two is what we are calling the serous cavity in these cases, the peritoneal, the pericardial, and the pleural cavity here. So that's important to note because you're going to meet patients with different conditions. There are patients that can present with excess fluid volumes within the pericardial cavity. Patients with different, let's say, bacterial infections, viral infections that irritate these layers, resulting into excess fluid buildup in the cavity. There are patients that can have excess fluid within the pleural cavity. Same goes with excess fluid in the peritoneal cavity. Whenever there is any excess fluid in any of these serous cavity, we use the term effusion. So here we shall say that this patient is having pericardial effusion if the fluid is above the normal. If the fluid is above the normal, here we shall call it pleural effusion, and here we shall call it peritoneal effusion, or we can use a better term clinically that we call ascites, if the fluid is above the normal levels. Okay, so that's the relevance of the simple squamous epithelium in these areas of the body. Hope that is clear. This is another image just to show you a closer look of the pericardial layers. You have the visceral close to the wall of the heart. Then we have the parietal close to the chest wall. All these are made up of simple squamous epithelial cells that are modified to produce fluid in the serous cavities. This is another image, but showing you the same thing. The serous cavities, we have the pleural cavity here, the pericardial cavity here, and the peritoneal cavity. All these cavities contain fluid, and it's normal for the fluid to be there. These cavities, of course, they will be covered in detail in your cardiorespiratory. You'll talk more about the pericardial cavities, the pleural cavities further, okay? And clinical appreciate the conditions associated with them. Same goes with the peritoneal cavity. There are many conditions, as we shall cover, or as you will cover those members that are going to be with Mr. Okiza, as you will appreciate more. And also the team I'm going to be handling. We shall talk more about these layers as we continue. Simple cuboidal epithelium. Now, the cuboidal cells are large cells. These cells are large because they are containing a lot of organelles that include the Golgi apparatus, the endoplasmic reticulum, and we know these organelles are going to be doing one thing. They are going to be secreting, producing vital products of the body. So all parts of the body that are lined by cuboidal epithelium, whether simple or stratified, those parts of the body are going to be involved in secretion. And it's not surprising that this epithelium is going to be lining glands. You know glands. Glands are those different parts of the body that are going to be involved in secretion. We have the pancreas. It's a gland. It has to be lined by the same epithelium. containing cells that are modified to secrete, for example, the hormones, insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, and others. Cells that can produce pancreatic products that are going to be part of the pancreatic juice, products like the enzymes and other components. Okay, so the pancreas will have the simple cuboid epithelium. The thyroid gland will have the simple cuboid epithelium that will help in producing thyroid hormones. Many parts of the body, all glands that you may think of, they are all lined by simple, either simple or stratified cuboidal epithelium. Okay. Then simple columnar. Now this one is very easy to understand. It's going to be lining different parts of the body. For example, we have a subtype that's going to be lining the GIT. Then we have another subtype. Basically, the role of these is going to be nearly different based on the modification of the cells that make up this epithelium. For example, in your small intestines, we have columnar cells. Yes, they are in one layer, and in these cells are modified to form finger-like extensions. These extensions are microvilli. Now imagine your intestine in a circular manner. If this is our epithelium, having those cells with the finger-like projections, let's say this is another cell, finger-like projections. These finger-like projections are going to easily allow absorption of the nutrients that are going to be formed in the small intestines: glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, all those nutrients that you get from the different types of foods that you eat. Those nutrients have to move from the lumen through the finger-like extensions into the cells. After going through the cells, they have to enter into the underlying blood vessels in the connective tissues to be transported to different parts of the body where they will be utilized. So that absorption is made easy because of the presence of the microvilli. Then also between the columnar cells, we have goblet cells that produce mucus that coats on the inner layer of the small intestines. That coating will be important so that there can be some bit of lubrication as food particles go along the layer of the small intestines. But also remember, we have acidic contents from the stomach. Those contents, we don't want them to injure our inner lining of the small intestines because it can lead to ulcerations in the small intestines. Normally, in an individual without an autoimmune disease, these ulcerations cannot easily occur because naturally the lining of the small intestines do have abundant goblet cells that produce mucus to lubricate the inner linings of the small intestines, preventing any likelihood of irritation or ulceration when food particles go over the lining of the small intestines. So we also have the same epithelium in other parts of the body, for example, the fallopian tubes. These tubes have this epithelium, but the difference is that apical surfaces of these cells are going to be modified to have cilia. Cilia is not the same as microvilli. Microvilli are just straight finger-like extensions that are non-motile. They don't move. They're just there to increase the surface area to easily trap the food nutrients. But the cilia, these are going to be motile structures. They are going to be waving sideways. And that wave-like action is very important when it comes to the fallopian tubes. We all know that normally we have egg cells being produced from the ovary. if there is any sperm cell that has come in, it will come and fertilize that cell, the egg cell or the ovum, so that it produces zygote that will go through the tube to come and attach the ovum to the site of fertilization. And the movement of the zygote towards the uterus for implantation is aided by this epithelium. These surface modifications help in the movement of those structures. That's why if a lady has chronic pelvic inflammatory disease or chronic infections, let's say gonorrhea, let's say chlamydia, it's possible for those pathogens that cause those infections to injure these cilia, rendering them non-functional, if that lady does not treat those types of infections. Okay, and if the cilia are affected, they may not be in position to easily allow movement of the ovum to the site of fertilization, or if fertilization occurs, it will be hard for the zygote to be pushed towards the uterus for implantation. So that's why these ladies, because of the chronic infections that are not treated early, these ladies can present with infertility simply because of the damage of this inner lining of the uterine tube by the pathogens that cause the sexually transmitted infections like gonorrhea and chlamydia. If at all that lady manages to, let's say, get pregnant and maybe there's formation of a zygote, this zygote may fail to easily move to the uterine cavity onto the wall for implantation. And these are the ladies that are going to present with tubal pregnancies. Those are pregnancies that occur if the zygote gets stuck in the tube and start maturation within the tube. Those are tubal pregnancies. Such pregnancies, most of the times they don't grow to full maturity because this is the narrow space. And what happens, the body is going to just expel this product of conception. It's going to be expelled either into the peritoneal cavity, or this tube may rupture, leading to massive internal bleeding. Okay, so that's how bad infections can be. They can lead to serious complications that can be fatal. So ladies, this is just a simple, of course, reminder. You always have to be cautious as you use those washrooms, because you are more predisposed to infections. If you get a UTI, the infections in your urinary tract can easily reach the reproductive tract, leading to such complications if you don't treat those infections. There are many signs of these infections. If you see these signs early enough, get the medication within a few days, 3, 5, or 1 week, in 1 week's time, these infections can be treated. If you don't treat them, many complications can arise. Pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Now, this one is a modified epithelium also. It's called pseudo-stratified because if you can see clearly, this tissue is just made up of one layer. This is one cell layer resting on the basement membrane. All these are cells that are going to be resting on the basement membrane. We don't have anything like second layers, just one layer of cells. But it appears as if it is multi-layered because the nuclei of these cells are positioned at different levels. That's why we call it pseudo-stratified. It is falsely seen as if it is stratified, but it is not. It's actually under simple epithelial tissues. Then these cells are the apical surface. They are modified to have cilia, but also between the columnar cells, we have goblet cells that are going to be producing mucus secretions. So this tissue is going to be very, very relevant along the respiratory tract, the upper respiratory tract, and it's going to be very important in trapping foreign bodies. The mucus will trap the foreign bodies, the cilia will propel these foreign bodies out of the respiratory tract to prevent any kind of lower respiratory infections because of those foreign bodies. But of course, people who chronically smoke, if you have chronic smokers here, just know that with time, you're going to have a tendency of developing lung infections. To the worst, lung cancer. Because as you smoke, you're going to be injuring these structures here. And by the time you reach the age of 40, 50 there, you're going to start presenting with lung problems, because your lungs are going to be always, every time, exposed to foreign bodies, because those foreign bodies can't be stopped from reaching the lungs. Dust particles and many other foreign bodies can easily reach your lungs, all the time increasing chances of lung infections. Stratified squamous epithelium. Now this one, it's called stratified squamous. It's self-explanatory. It's an epithelium with many layers of cells, and these layers, most of them are going to be thin and flat. And this epithelium is categorized into two. We have the keratinized type and the non-keratinized type. The keratinized type is going to be found within the skin. Then the non-keratinized type is going to be found in the wet surfaces of the body. Within the skin, you all know that we have the epidermis, we have the dermis, below that we have the fat layer. The epidermis is going to be a layer made up of epithelial tissue. And this is the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. It's called keratinized because the top layer of these cells will have keratin. Keratin is a protein that will enhance protection of your skin to prevent easy entry of foreign bodies, okay, into your skin, providing the first line of defense in your body. First line of defense from different foreign bodies to easily enter your body via the skin. Okay, so because of the presence of that layer, your skin is going to be the first line of defense for different foreign bodies. The non-keratinized type is found in different parts of the body that are prone to abrasion or wear and tear. For example, your oral cavity, the inside of your mouth, the tongue, okay, all these structures, whenever you're chewing solid food particles, they are prone to injury, but they never get severely injured because they are made up of a thick or a multi-layered epithelium, an epithelium with many cell layers, and if there is any kind of, let's say, rough chewing or solidified food particles, or let's say hot food particles, or too cold, just the top layers of the cells will be lost. Just the top layers of the cells will be lost. I believe you've ever been there and you've ever seen, let's say, some inner peeling of the mouth coming out because probably of the hot drink that you've been taking. That layer will come out and it will be replaced by the remaining epithelial cells, because we know that this tissue has the ability to regenerate. Okay, but also that layer will peel off and there will be no any kind of bleeding because our tissue lacks blood vessels, which is advantageous in this case. The vagina is prone to abrasion during sexual intercourse, and it's made up of very many layers of cells, as you can see, and these many cell layers will prevent injury of the deeper tissues of the vagina. Okay, if there is any intercourse, of course, there may be just some few cell layers that may shed off during intercourse, and this doesn't cause any kind of bleeding because this tissue doesn't have any blood vessels. But of course, victims of rape can present with bleeding after that rough sexual intercourse because probably it may involve deeper injury of the deeper tissues of the vagina. where we have the blood vessels, and that's why those victims of rape can present with bruises, but also some bit of vaginal bleeding. Okay, so that's a very important tissue in that part of the body. Then we have the transitional epithelium. Transition means to change. This epithelium is going to lie in different parts of the body that are predisposed to stress. Parts of the body like these ones here, the urinary bladder, the ureters, some portions, and some portions of the urethra. These parts of the body, for example, as you can see in this image, whenever urine is flowing from the kidney, it's going to be flowing in large volumes, and whenever it's flowing, this ureter here is going to be exposed to stress. The urinary bladder is going to be exposed to stress. The urethra is going to be exposed to increased stress because of the increased volumes of urine that's going through it. So what happens naturally? These parts of the body are going to be made up of an epithelium that can change its shape based on the stress applied to it. Whenever there is increased urinary volumes, this epithelium is going to stretch. For example, as you can see here, this is an empty, almost empty urinary bladder. If it's empty, this transitional epithelium is going to have cells that are nearly round. But once it becomes filled with urine, the cells are going to become thin and flattened, allowing some degree of stretching and expansion of the urinary bladder. So that's important because imagine if this tissue wasn't there, and let's say the urinary bladder is filled with excess urinary volumes, what would happen? It would easily increase chances of this bladder to rupture. The wall could rupture, but it cannot rupture because there is this tissue that can allow it to expand and accommodate the increased urinary volumes from the kidneys. Same goes to the ureters. They can somehow expand to accommodate the urinary volumes from the renal pelvis or from the kidney. Same goes with the urethra. Can be some bit of expansion to accommodate the urine that is going through it. Also, this tissue that has many layers can be advantageous because imagine if these structures had a thin epithelium, it could easily allow urinary components to easily come out in the surrounding tissues of the abdomen or the pelvic cavity. But it's impossible because the epithelium is multi-layered. The chances of urinary components coming out are less. They can't come out. Okay, so this epithelium will keep urine within the urinary tract, reducing chances of outflow of the toxic urinary components. Okay. Since it is lining structures of the urinary tract, it can also be called the urothelium. Uro meaning the urinary system, thelium meaning epithelium. So the epithelium of the urinary system, the transitional epithelium, can also be called the urothelium. So it can also be seen in this image. Same thing. There's a change in the shape of the cells to allow some degree of stretching to give capacity to your urinary bladder to easily accommodate the urinary volumes. Do you have questions about epithelial tissues? Let me go through the chat. Are the serous membranes still under simple? Yes, serous membranes are made up of simple squamous epithelium, which is very important in fluid production in the serous cavities. Yes, serous membranes are made up of simple squamous epithelium. I'm responding to Gerard. Then someone was asking the salivary glands. Yes, the salivary glands are going to be lined by simple cuboidal because it's the cuboidal cells that are going to be secreting the important products. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation.
Then Just a minute. Someone was asking, is the tubal pregnancy also termed as ectopic? Yes. Ectopic pregnancy is the type of pregnancy that occurs when there is a formation of basically development of an embryo outside the uterine cavity. So yes, tubal pregnancy is a type of ectopic pregnancy. Someone was asking, what's the function of cilia? I've just explained the function of cilia. Patients, hope you've got that. Okay. Okay. Are there any members with questions? If you have a question, you can raise your hand so that I attend to you, like 3 members, then we continue. Yes, Gerard. Gerard Job.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, sir. My question is about you were saying the simple cuboidal and stratified cuboidal, they are found at sites of secretion, and you mentioned an example of the glands. For me, I just wanted to know specifically examples of glands under the simple cuboidal and the ones in stratified cuboidal. Thank you.
Okay, so the glands that are lined by simple cuboidal, I give an example of the pancreas. We have the thyroid, okay, and those that line by the stratified cuboidal. We have. I hope you know that the testicles are taken to be endocrine structures or glands. So testicles are made up of seminiferous tubules that have a stratified cuboidal epithelium that will help in production of testosterone. Okay, the ovaries have a layer of simple cuboidal epithelium around their surface to allow production of female sex hormones. The adrenal glands, they are made up of a layer of a stratified cuboidal epithelium to allow production of the different adrenal hormones. Okay, so there are quite many examples. I may not mention all, but there are many examples under that line. Let's hear from Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you very much. My questions, they are only 2. One of them is actually about pseudostratified. Can we say these cells actually, because of them being at different levels, then they take up different shapes? That is number 1. Number 2, besides the skin and nails.
I beg on number 1. I beg your pardon on number 1. I didn't get it well.
Yeah, I'm looking at pseudostratified. That is actually a single layer, but being having those cells at different levels, then they appear to be double layered, sometimes many layers. So I was like, can we say that those cells do take up different shapes? That was my first question. Then the second question, I was like, I wanted to know, besides skin and nails, where else in the body can we find the keratin protein? Thank you.
Okay, so the first one, if you look at the transition epithelium, the pseudostratified epithelium, all those cells are they are columnar in shape, or they are column-like in shape. They don't have varieties of shapes. Just that some are large, some are small, as you've seen in the image, but they are all column-like cells. Okay, so they don't have different shapes. That's why we don't have anything like pseudostratified cuboidal, pseudostratified squamous. We only have pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Then on the second question, areas of the body where we find keratin. Keratin is found in the epidermis of the skin, in that stratified squamous epithelium, in the nails, as you've mentioned. The hair, of course, has keratin as one of the components to strengthen your hair, so that your hair doesn't just fall off anyhow. Your hair is strengthened in position because of the keratin. Some part of the tooth is made up of keratin to make your teeth hard. That's the enamel. The enamel of your teeth is hard because of that protein. Okay. Those are some of the locations that I can mention within your body. Hope that is clear. The last question from Rebecca. Then I'll go through the chat again. Then after we continue. Rebecca.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I beg your pardon?
I was like, do the cilia's regenerate in the fallopian tubes? In case they are...
So in case?
In case they are infected, like in case they are destroyed by infections.
Okay, so normally, you know that in females there are hormones. There are those female sex hormones, the likes of progesterone, the likes of estrogen. Those are the common ones that you can mention. Those hormones normally they allow growth and repair of the different parts of the reproductive tract. For example, the endometrium, but also they can allow growth and repair of the lining of the fallopian tubes. Okay, but I mentioned these cells can become severely injured. If there is severe injury of the cells of the lining of the fallopian tube, the chances of regeneration can be impossible. That's why it can result into permanent failure for a lady to get pregnant, just because of that structural abnormality or that structural defect of the cells that contain the cilia. Normally, they can regenerate, but if there is severe infections, the chances of regeneration can be impaired. Yes, that's how I can respond to you. That was Rebecca. Okay, so I think let's shift to connective tissues. Let's shift to connective tissues and just introduce them, then after we can call it a day. So connective tissues, as we can see, are connective tissues. These tissues, they are going to bind other tissues of the body and different organs of the body. They support and bind other tissues of the body and other organs of the body. And these tissues are not the same as epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues were just made up of linings that are only made up of cells that are firmly connected together. But for the connective tissues, they are going to be made up of cells, but also many components around the cells. These components around the cells, we call them extracellular matrix. They form the extracellular matrix. And these components around the cells include the protein fibers and the ground substance. The ground substance is just like a simple medium containing water and other components, as you are going to see, and this medium will contain the protein fibers, different types of fibers, as we are going to see. So connective tissues are very, very strong, and they are going to be majorly involved in supporting your body. That's why they have to be made up of many components to give them enough strength to do so. Okay, so there are very many categories, as we are going to see shortly. So they are the most abundant tissue types in the body. Okay, many parts of your body contains the connective tissues. They have very many functions based on the particular type of connective tissue, as we are going to see. But we've already seen that the cells of the connective tissues are not going to be connected together. They are not going to be joined together. They are going to be further apart. In epithelial tissues, the cells were tightly held together, but in connective tissues, in most connective tissues, the cells are going to be further apart. And around the cells, we said we have what we call the extracellular matrix, and this is made up of medium that we call the ground substance plus the protein fibers in that medium. And this extracellular matrix will determine the how hard or how soft a particular connective tissue is. Okay, or you can say to determine the tissue density. And the tissue density is a property that is very, very, very significant when it comes to ultrasound scanning. Okay, why? Because we know that there is a dense, let's say, part of the body. These beams are not going to easily go through. Okay, but if there is just a simple medium, let's say blood, let's say any kind of fluid, these beams can easily go through, and you can easily see structures beneath those parts of the body with the fluid, or let's say with blood. But if it's bone, you won't see anything underneath the bone. For example, if you see in this image here, we have this, of course, the vertebral column around here. If you try to look at the bones of the vertebral column by positioning your transducer there, on your image, you realize that those points where the vertebral bones are, you won't see anything beneath them because these bones can't allow easy passage of these ultrasound beams. So the tissue density matters during scanning, as you're going to learn in detail. If you're scanning, let's say, the lungs, of course, in the chest, you realize that you'll be obstructed by the ribs. The ribs are made up of bone. Bone is a closely packed kind of connective tissue. And you just see shadow beneath or underneath the ribs because these beams from the transducer cannot easily go through. Okay, just like how you can see if a patient has any kind of, let's say, a stone in the gallbladder, what you see posterior to the stone, you just see shadow because the beams can't easily go through. You just see shadow. Most of the beams are going to be reflected. You won't see anything beneath that particular structure. When it comes to fluid, you can see structures underneath that particular organ with the fluid. If it's the blood vessel, for example, this is an also ultrasound image showing you the abdominal aorta. You can see that beneath this vessel there is no complete shadowing. If you can see, there's no complete shadowing. At least you can, if you focus well, you can see some structures beneath these blood vessels. Just a minute. Okay, so as I was saying, underneath or posterior to these vessels, you can see some bit of structures. Posterior to the urinary bladder, you can see the uterus. You can see structures if you scan a particular patient. So any fluid interface will easily allow the beam to easily go through to allow easy visualization of underlying structures. Blood is a fluid interface. It can allow the beams to easily go through for you to see structures underneath. But structures like bones, they are closely packed. You don't see anything beneath them. You just see the shadow. So in general, if you look at the composition of connective tissues, you can appreciate it here. This can be any tissue of the body, any connective tissue of the body. It could be the dermis of the skin, or any other connective tissue. But I'm just using this image to show you what connective tissues are made up of. Broadly, you can see they are made up of cells. Okay, particular types of cells, as you can see. Okay, then you can see around the cells we have the extracellular matrix that is made up of a thick gel-like fluid containing the protein fibers. You can see. So that's how connective tissues are going to be generally structured. And the cells, of course, they include the white blood cells, macrophages, the lymphocytes, neutrophils. All those are white blood cells. Macrophages help in engulfing bacteria that may have entered connective tissues. The lymphocytes help also in attacking viral particles that may have entered connective tissues. These lymphocytes come from blood, of course. The neutrophils also come from these blood capillaries to attack any bacteria in this connective tissue. Then the macrophages are permanent cells of the connective tissues, but these lymphocytes and neutrophils, they are cells of the blood, and they just come out when there is need to attack particular foreign bodies. Fibroblasts are fiber-producing cells. They produce the collagen fibers, they produce the elastic fibers, they produce the reticular fibers. They're just cells that will secrete those fibers. And they are very important cells that will have to be functional always. For example, when you get any injury of the body, we know that a particular part of the body sometime will have some scar tissue after the injury. That scar tissue is made up of protein fibers, these so-called collagen fibers that are going to be produced by the fibroblasts. So in tissue healing or in body healing, these cells are very relevant. Fat cells are also called adipocytes. They are cells that are going to be storing fat or fats. Then you have mast cells. Mast cells are unique types of cells that contain many vital components. Okay, these cells are going to respond whenever there is body injury. Let's imagine this is your skin. This is the epithelium of your skin. This is the underlying connective tissue of the skin, where we have this blood capillary. Let's say there's an injury here. There's always a chance of germs to enter at the site of the injury, to go into your body. So once the germs reach the connective tissues, the mast cells detect that, and they release chemical substances that include histamine. This histamine or histamine is going to come and cause relaxation of the smooth muscle fibers of these blood capillaries. And these vessels are going to widen, allowing more blood flow. but also after blood comes in, as you can see here, as more blood comes in, this histamine will allow detachment of the endothelial cells of the blood capillary, so that these cells of the blood can easily come out in a process that we call diapedesis. These cells will come out and will help in targeting these germs that may have entered your body through that site of injury. So what you're seeing here is that at the site of injury, there's going to be some swelling. At the site of injury, there's going to be some redness, okay? All these are cardinal signs of what we call inflammation. Inflammation is the normal body's response towards an injury, and it's part of the healing process. At the site of injury, there are going to be four features that you can appreciate there. Number one, that part of the body is going to be under pain, because of course this this part of the skin contains, of course, epithelium, and epithelial tissues contain nerve endings. So any kind of injury, you obviously experience pain. There will be swelling of this part of the body, because as the white blood cells leave the capillaries, there is a possibility of some plasma fluid to leak into the surrounding connective tissue, leading to swelling of that part of the body. Redness will be appreciated there in the injured part because of the vasodilation of the underlying blood vessels in the connective tissues. And whenever there is vasodilation, I say there will be increased blood flow. So the increased blood flow in that injured area makes that area to become reddish. Of course, warmth because of the increased blood flow. Blood has the same temperature like that of the body, so that part will be warm. So all these are cardinal signs of inflammation. Inflammation, it's part of the body's response to an injury, and it's initiated by mast cells, cells of your connective tissues. Within the connective tissues, we not only have cells, but we've said we have the extracellular matrix. That extracellular matrix is going to be made up of a gel-like fluid that we call the ground substance. This fluid or this material is going to be made up of things like these complex sugar molecules that we call them glycosaminoglycans. Okay, it's a complicated name, but just understand these are just complex sugar molecules that include the hyaluronic acid, chondroitin sulfate, and many others. We have the proteoglycans, the glycoproteins. All these are just components in this gel-like fluid, components that will easily attract water, so that this fluid can be jelly-like. And this property is mostly relevant when it comes to cartilages. Cartilages are connective tissues that are somehow semi-solid. They're a bit soft. They are soft because of the ground substance, allowing them to easily absorb shock at joints. Okay, but also other connective tissues do have this ground substance. Okay, and it's going to be performing different functions. This ground substance can allow easy migration of cells during wound healing. For example, the white blood cells can easily migrate to the particular part of the connective tissue that may be injured, just like as you're seeing here, white blood cells are migrating, going through the ground substance. Shock absorption, mostly in cartilages, because this medium is going to be made up of water, and it will make the cartilages soft to allow easy shock absorption at joints. Diffusion of nutrients between the cells is going to be aided by this ground substance. But also remember, just close the connective tissues, we have epithelial tissues that contain epithelial cells, cells that have to be continuously nourished. And these nourishments come from the underlying blood capillaries in the connective tissues. So the nutrients here go through the ground substance to reach the cells. Okay, so that's another function of the ground substance. Provides the medium through which cells and fibers are held together and supported. So all this is very important for your connective tissues. You can see they're made up of these complexes that are going to be attracting water molecules towards them, allowing your ground substance to be in a semi-fluid state. Protein fibers are just of three categories. We have the collagen fibers, the elastic fibers, and the reticular fibers. Collagen fibers are going to provide strength and flexibility. They're very strong. You can see they're thick. So they provide some bit of strength and some bit of flexibility. Elastic fibers provide elasticity. Reticular fibers are going to form supporting networks, supportive networks. Collagen fibers are going to be found in many parts of the body, in the bones, in the cartilage. Some parts of the hair contains collagen fibers. The basement membranes of the epithelium contains collagen fibers. So they're going to be widely positioned in different parts of the body. Okay, and that's why if someone has got a mutation at a particular part of DNA, that's supposed to code for production of this protein. If someone has any mutation at that part of DNA that's supposed to code for production of the collagen fibers, this person can present with a multiple variety of medical issues in different parts of the body. Okay, for example, there's a syndrome that you call Marfan syndrome. This syndrome is a syndrome that will happen if at all an individual has got defective proteins, collagen proteins, fibrillin proteins. All those are very important proteins of connective tissues. If they are defective because of the mutations in particular parts of the DNA that codes for their production, if they are defective, they may not perform their normal functions. Okay, that's why in such patients with Marfan syndrome, these individuals are going to have weak connective tissues. For example, the blood vessels, blood vessels are made up of connective tissues. Blood vessels are going to be very fragile, prone to injuries. Your lungs are going to be very fragile. The joints and other parts of the body are going to be more prone to injuries because of the lack of enough connective tissue fibers in those parts of the body. And the most serious risks associated with this disease can occur within the heart and the aorta, and most appreciated in the aorta, where we see patients presenting with abnormal enlargements of the aorta. We know that the aorta is a blood vessel. Just like any other blood vessel, it has to be made up of a connective tissue layer, a layer that has to make this vessel strong, to accommodate blood regardless of the pressures of that blood. But if someone has not enough proteins in this connective tissue, it may easily result into abnormal expansion of a blood vessel, a condition that we call an aneurysm. Aneurysms occur when there's abnormal expansion of the blood vessel. It mostly occurs along the abdominal aorta because it's the largest artery of the body that's going to be carrying large volumes of blood at a very high pressure. But also, these aneurysms can also occur along other arteries of the body. The arteries within your brain, the arteries of the kidney, the arteries of the heart, mostly in patients with hypertension. Someone has hypertension, that person is going to have high blood pressures, and that increased blood pressures can easily result into abnormal expansion of those tiny blood vessels. The tiny blood vessels in the brain, the tiny blood vessels around your heart, the kidney, and other blood vessels of the body. So that's a common condition that you always be diagnosing, and it's caused by abnormalities or deficiency of enough connective tissue fibers within the connective tissue layers of the blood vessels. These patients are also going to have weak joints, because you know that these connective tissue fibers also strengthen joints. Collagen fibers strengthen joints. So if the collagen fibers are defective or if they are deficient, the joints are going to be hypermobile. Okay, I do believe it may not be possible for someone to position their finger in such a manner, a normal person. But someone with Marfan syndrome, these individuals can abnormally move their fingers because they are less stabilizers at the joints, and this can increase chances of joint dislocations in the body. So that's a very common type of connective tissue syndrome, Marfan syndrome. It's a very common condition. Okay, coming to the elastic fibers, these are going to be composed of a protein that we call elastin, a protein that can be in position to stretch and recoil, just like a spring can easily stretch and can easily come back to its original position or length. And such fibers are going to be abundant in parts of the body that have to expand and relax. For example, the lungs during the breathing cycle. Okay. Reticular fibers, we say these are going to form supportive networks in particular parts of the body. For example, your spleen, your liver are going to be made up of abundant reticular connective tissue with reticular fibers that are going to form networks or meshworks that look like nets to easily trap foreign bodies in the spleen and also in the liver. So apart from providing supportive networks, these mesh network patterns formed by these fibers are going to easily allow the trapping of foreign bodies for destruction in your spleen and in your liver. Okay, so finally, let's finalize by categorizing connective tissue, and then we shall continue from there by looking at specific examples. How are they categorized? This image, you can see a very simple of classifying them. We have what we call the fluid connective tissues, we have the supporting connective tissues, and we have what we call the connective tissue proper. Connective tissue proper, this is basically a class made up of various examples of connective tissues that do have most of the components of connective tissue. The ground substance, the protein fibers, the cells that we've talked about, all these subtypes will have most of those components. That's why they lie under what we call connective tissue proper. This is categorized into loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue. Loose connective tissues have few protein fibers, and that makes them to have open spaces within them, open framework within them, because of the less protein fibers. These have packed protein fibers, and that makes them dense. Okay, we shall look at the categories and the examples of under these in detail when we come back in the next session. Then here we have the fluid connective tissues. Now these ones are going to be those connective tissues that are going to be in a fluid state or in a liquid state. For example, blood and lymph. Then you have the supporting connective tissues. These are going to be part of your skeletal framework. And of course, these include the bone and the cartilages. These are going to be supporting connective tissues. So when we return next time, we are going to look at each of these in detail. We're going to look at the areola. What is it? Where is it found? Why is it found there? The adipose, the reticular, all these. We shall look at blood in detail, lymph, cartilages, and bone. So read about these in detail so that when we return next time, we can have a good discussion about them. So that's what I had prepared for you today. I've gone past. This session was just a session to discuss epithelial tissues and broadly categorize or talk about the introduction of connective tissues. Okay. Are we all good?